All right, thanks for your patience. So today we have two speakers here from Metro Transit. We have Cindy Harper and Julie Martinez. Cindy Harper is the manager of route planning in Metro Transit's Service Development Division. She's been in the transit industry for more than 25 years and is a past chair for APTA's Multimodal Operations Planning Subcommittee and has been with Metro Transit since 2000. She's worked on several route and sector restructurings associated with the new commuter rail line, 2 LRT lines, 2 highway BRT lines, and 5 arterial BRT lines. Network now is her second agency-wide service improvement plan. She's originally from Central Illinois and is a graduate of Elmhurst College, now University, in suburban Chicago. Her husband is also in the transit industry, working with contracted operations. As a result, their vacations include a lot of riding transit in new places. Julie Martinez has been with Metro Transit's Community Affairs Division since 2023. She works on outreach and engagement for a variety of non-BRT projects, such as Better Bus Routes, Metro Micro, and Nicollet Mall Transit Alternatives. And with that, I will pass it over to Cindy and Julie. Clip it on.
That's what I was going to do. Let me know if that doesn't work. Good afternoon. I'm Cindy, and wait for him to advance the slide here. Okay, so for those of you who on the Mentimeter checked that rarely column, a little bit of background first about Metro Transit before we get into our Network Now project. So Metro Transit is part of the Metropolitan Council, which does a lot more than just operate transit service. We're also in charge of regional planning, regional parks, wastewater treatment, and we administer affordable housing programs. We are the largest provider of transit service in the region and in the state, but we're not the only one in the metro. There's also 4 suburban transit authorities, which are shown in gray on this map. One, Maple Grove, Plymouth, Minnesota Valley in the south suburbs, and Southwest Transit. The council also operates Metro Mobility paratransit service for those who are unable to ride fixed route service due to disabilities. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So Network Now is a short-term vision. It's our planning vision just through the year 2027. So when we started back in 2022, it was a 5-year project. Now it's down to more like a 3-year project. It has 2 different purposes. The first one is to resolve the status of routes that are currently suspended. We have about 60 routes. Many of them are commuter express services that are suspended. Many of those have been since the beginning of the pandemic back in early 2020. So we need to determine whether those routes are being restored or not. And in many cases, those routes are often supported by facilities such as park and rides. So in addition to figuring out the future of the routes, we also need to figure out future of the facilities associated with those routes. Also, and this is, I'd say, more the fun part of the project, looking to improve service by adding new routes as well as redesigning existing routes to match today's travel patterns and transit needs, which have changed considerably in the last 4 years. Frequency and span improvements on existing service, as well as preparing for new metro lines or transitways, and also expanding our microtransit system. Next slide. So why are we doing this project? First of all, it's a pivotal time in our agency's history. We've seen nearly 50% ridership decline between 2020 and 2021, and that's not unique to just Metro Transit. That's very, very common, unfortunately, throughout the entire transit agency around the whole transit industry around the whole country. This is also tied to about a 30% reduction in the amount of in-service hours that we put out on the street. Also, travel patterns are changing. We are seeing fewer downtown commuters. We're definitely seeing the impacts of telecommuting at least some days of the week. As a result, we've seen that our service that runs all day, that serves many different types of trip purposes, has been what's been most resilient for us in terms of ridership, not so much the commuter-oriented express services that are just geared towards one purpose and only operate during rush hour. Our workforce is a top priority. It's been a challenge for us to maintain staffing levels since 2020, much less to grow. And that's, again, not just unique to transit. If you remember, particularly coming out of the pandemic, everybody had now hiring signs out front, and you know, restaurants were closed on certain days, dining room was all sorts of stuff. So we certainly haven't been immune to that, but I do think we've turned a corner on this. We have a new union contract with our operators that has higher wages, and then we've been doing some other initiatives as well in order to improve retention and to attract new staff, which we need to do, because in order to improve, in order to add service, of course, that means we need to grow as an organization, both growing literally just operators, but also all of the behind the scenes support staff, mechanics and dispatchers and facilities maintenance folks and administration and so on and so forth. And then finally, we are growing. We're growing quickly. One of the things that changed during the course of the Network Now project was the addition of a regional sales tax that took effect in October of 2023. So that radically changed the picture of transit funding in this region. We also have currently, we have 3 arterial bus rapid transit lines that are under construction, as well as an LRT line that's under construction. So for an agency that's generally never had more than 1 project under construction at a time, to have 4 of them at the same time has been quite a challenge. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So just a quick timeline of the project. We actually started back in the fall of 2022, so this has been almost a 2-year project so far, but really kicked into gear, certainly at least publicly, in early 2023 with our engagement. Then we since have drafted our concept plan, and now we're really, I'd say, at the doorstep of releasing that concept plan that will become public in mid-September. And then we will have a comment period through the fall, and then make modifications based on the feedback that we do receive, and hope to have the council approve the plan in early 2025. Next slide. Okay. So there's really 3 pillars that we've been working with to help guide this network modification, or our big resetting. And all 3 of those pillars are summarized in this Establishing the Foundations report that is available online on our project website. We released it last fall. And it really focused on engagement, so capturing the values and thoughts of our customers and other stakeholders around the region. We also have a chapter in the report that focuses on network performance, both how we were doing prior to 2019, and then what all has changed. What have we seen in terms of ridership patterns, in terms of trends? What other changes have we seen? As well as what opportunities are out there for us. And then the 3rd pillar is policy. So certainly making sure we are following the regional policy guidance from the Met Council, namely the Transportation Policy Plan. And I will note there's a 2050 version of that plan is actually out for comment right now, if you're interested. Next slide. So we started by checking in with the community on their transit values and priorities. We did this with a series of workshops, pop-up events, by getting out and riding buses and trains, and also we had a survey. The survey generated more than 6,000 comments and included both trade-off and allocation questions. The allocation questions asked respondents to allocate points based on their values, how to prioritize the types of services, and allocate service in areas that have different levels of demand. And then trade-off questions, so would you rather type questions. Next slide. So on the right is an example of one of those trade-off questions. Would you rather have equity versus geographic evenness? And there's always an A and a B, so 2 opposite sides of the spectrum here. And we did not allow people to pick. We made them pick a side of the fence. We didn't let them say, in the middle or neutral or no choice. So your options were either you strongly agreed with A, you leaned towards A, you leaned towards B, or you strongly agreed towards B. But we made them pick a side. And so it was these kinds of trade-off questions. This is just an example that really kind of helped give us some feedback in terms of which way, as we start forming our plan, what we should prioritize. We learned that reliability is key, even more so than increasing frequency, and that we need to prioritize transit that serves the most riders. It's important for us to do this in an equitable way in order to provide good service to those who rely on us the most, such as people of colors and those lower income communities. Also, we need to focus on improving frequency and span on existing service. We have a solid foundation in our local route network to build on, with opportunities for growth, especially in the non-rush hour. Next slide, please. Okay, so these next few slides are going to review some of the key takeaways that were in the network performance portion of that establishing the foundations report. So the first is workforce. Here is a chart that shows our operating staffing levels since 2021. Before the pandemic, we had about 1,450 bus operators, but then, like most companies during the early days of COVID, we paused hiring for about 9 months and have been playing catch up pretty much ever since. So walking through the chart, the orange line is the actual number of bus operators that we have over a course of time. So December 21 on the far left, May of 2024 on the far right. The blue line is the number that we need in order to provide our scheduled service. And anytime you can see that the blue line is higher than the orange line, then we have the possibility of missing scheduled service. It means we don't have enough operators to cover all the service, and we're scrambling through things like overtime and other ways. You'll notice that about halfway through, that was December of 2022, the blue line makes a significant drop. That's when we finally reduced service we finally acknowledged we can't keep trying anymore, and bit the bullet and actually had a fairly significant reduction in the amount of service in order to be in line with the actual workforce that we had. This table ends spring of 2024, but as of today, the orange line is above the blue line, so that's good news. And we are adding service in a strategic and sustainable way. For example, we just had our quarterly service changes take effect last weekend, and both the blue and the green line light rail lines have now been improved from 15-minute service to 12-minute service. So incremental changes. Also, just keep in mind that this is more than just operators. This table is just operators, but we really, the bigger picture, it also supports staff and a lot of other folks as well. Next slide. Okay, so this is a table that shows the level of service by service type. So the yellow is fall of 2019. The blue is from earlier this summer. 3 different categories: light rail on the left, commuter express, and we throw North Star in with that as well in the middle, and then our BRT and local bus service on the right. And you'll see that BRT and local bus service, just the amount of service we're providing, is nearly back to pre-pandemic levels, although I will note that that's not always exactly on the exact same routes. And the LRT number has gone up just a smidge because this is before we went from 15-minute to 12-minute service last weekend. Next slide. So this is a graph of key ridership trends. It shows how ridership has changed by service type. The orange is bus rapid transit, red is commuter express service, green is LRT, and blue is local bus service. So for all service types, of course, there's a very dramatic change in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, but ridership is rebounding, with the exception of our commuter-oriented service, and it's even rebounding there, but it's certainly at much smaller levels. So there's a couple things here that are impacting this outside of just the pure ridership changes. This includes the opening of 2 new bus rapid transit lines during this time period: the orange line on 35W in late 2021, and then the D line, which was the former Route 5, in fall of 2022. So some of the routes, or some of the riders that would have initially been in the blue local route category, have shifted over into the orange. And so that's part of what also is going on here. Next slide, please. When people ride has changed. This is one of those trends that has been a really significant change for us. So there's two different charts on here. The one at the top shows across the x-axis is hour of the day. So this shows one service day. And then the y-axis is hourly boardings. The light gray line is looking back at 2019. So you can see we had pretty significant AM and PM peaks that very, very sharp and much, much higher than what we what we were seeing in the midday or at other times. The black line is the spring of 2024. So one of the things that we're seeing is that, of course, overall ridership is still down. We have a PM peak. We don't really have much of an AM peak anymore. We have a little bit, but not nearly what it used to be. And we are seeing that there's been ridership growth. Certainly the gap or the difference in the midday ridership between what it used to be pre-COVID and what it is now has narrowed significantly, both in the midday and into the evening. And really, we're starting to see this is pretty similar to what the kind of the curve that we see on Saturdays and Sundays as well. So that's been a big change, is just the rush hour. The other table on here, the bar charts, the blue is for local service and the red is commuter and express. So the various days of the week across from Sunday to Saturday for the two, and on the y-axis, and then, or on the x-axis, the y-axis is boardings. And I would like to point out just the sheer number of boardings is way different between the two. You're talking a total of 100,000 or so on the blue, the local side, more of about 6,000 on the red side. So just to kind of give you an idea of just the sheer difference. But the other piece here that I want to point out is that particularly on the commuter express side, we are seeing significant change differences by weekday. And we do weekday, Saturday, Sunday schedules. We don't schedule by individual day of the week. And so that's also a challenge for us in the commuter express market, is that, if you're committing to a trip, you're committing to putting it out there 5 days a week, even though it may only be used 2 days a week. So that's also part of the challenge. Next slide, please. Why people ride has also changed. Most trips now are for purposes other than commuting during the traditional rush hours. Our commute trips dropped from about 34% back in 2020 to 20% now. The number one, now the most common purpose is shopping and errands, pretty closely followed by non-peak work commute, and then peak 9 to 5 work commute. Those are the three top on the bar, on the top bars on the left there. And then college and university is number 4 at about 15%. And a lot of that is being fed by the fact that we have universal pass for the University of Minnesota. That is automatically included with the with your student ID. It's just part of the fees. They don't purchase anything separately, and so they're just given. It's just given to them, and that has really caused very significant increases in our ridership as well. And as I've noted, our local bus has really been resilient, and the BRT ridership is above the 2019 levels, of course, partially because we've opened some new ones, but also just the fact that that's the most frequent, that's what's out there all day. You can use it for a variety of purposes. That's really been where we've managed to keep our market hold. Next slide, please. A little bit more insight into the commuter express market. What we've seen in terms of park and ride usage has also changed. So these bars represent system-wide park and ride usage. So on the far left, 2004, 2005, all the way up to 2023. So you can see we had in the first decade of the century, we were continuously growing, adding to the point where we had about, by 2015, 2016, we had about 35,000 park and ride spaces available in the system. The blue is observed parking use. The red is capacity. So you can, we've never been full, but you can certainly see that the utilization was much higher. We were closer to about 20,000 park and riders a day. You can see between 2019 here on the far left and 2020, you can see where the bottom just completely dropped out. We went from 15,000 riders to less than 1,000 in 1 year. It was just absolutely crazy. And we are very slowly rebuilding, but as you can see, that is still, the capacity has come down a little bit as we have closed park and rides that we just no longer need or gotten out of some lease agreements. But even in 2023, you're talking under 5,000 park and riders in the entire system per day. And that includes all of the suburban providers as well, who that's their entire bread and butter is park and riders. Also, just want to note that our park and riders, for the most part, tend to have other alternatives. Our demographics for our commuter express riders are quite a bit different than for local riders. They tend to be more affluent and have other alternatives. And so when we've looked at, a limited amount of resources and where do you put them, certainly if somebody's got alternatives, think about that a little bit differently than if somebody can't get to their job or to where they need to go because they don't have another option or another good option. Next slide, please. So in addition to changes in travel patterns, we are growing. As I mentioned, we have 4 metro lines currently under construction. Those are the ones that are outlined in the yellow box. So the gold line between downtown St. Paul and Woodbury opens next March. The B line, which is essentially replacing the Route 21, so that's Lake Street and Marshall Avenue, opens in June. The E line, which is essentially replacing Route 6, so that's University of Minnesota, downtown Minneapolis, Hennepin Avenue out to Southdale, opens in December. And then the Green Line extension from downtown out to the Southwest Metro opens in 2027. We have another line that also falls within our 2027 timeline here that we haven't started construction on yet. That is the G line, which is basically start downtown St. Paul and north using Rice Street. So today's Route 62. That will open in phases. The downtown, the north part will open in 2027. That's tied to some construction, rebuilding of Rice Street. The south portion of the G line, which is Robert Street down through the west side of St. Paul and West St. Paul area, will open in 2028 when MnDOT is done, or the county, one of the two, is done rebuilding Robert Street. Also have a number of other lines that are in the planning, various stages of the planning step of the process. So lots and lots going on. Next slide, please. So all of these different trends that we've just talked about, the various changes that we've seen in ridership and who's riding and when and why, really, and as well as all of the feedback that we collected back in 23, have resulted in these 5 guiding principles that we've been leaning on as we have drafted our concept plan. So that includes adapting service to changes in transit markets and travel patterns, preparing for all of these new metro lines, maintaining the reliability of our service, building on success to grow ridership, adding service where people use transit the most, and at the same time, balancing that with providing access to opportunities and services with the focus on advancing equities and reducing regional disparities. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak preview of some of the highlights of our concept plan. We have not released, the plan will be released on September 12th. We actually go to our transportation committee next Monday with some of the details. So there's nothing in here that hasn't already been talked about, but we really aren't doing public presentations quite yet, but Jack's been persistent. So the next slide, please. Okay, so our draft concept plan overall expands service in the network by more than 35%. That's an incredibly high increase in the amount of hours of service that we're able to provide, and really geared, oriented towards improving ridership. We do this by improving coverage and mobility, expanding bus routes, as well as our microtransit service, which I'll talk about more in just a second, as well as redesigning our express and commuter services in order to meet the travel needs of our region today. Next slide. So those 5 principles that I talked about just a minute ago, here's how they're integrated into various parts of the concept plan. Of course, growing ridership. This is tied to improved frequency and span on local routes, and it's very significant a number of local routes that's going to be able to happen to, including bringing blue and green lines up to 10-minute, which hopefully we'll be able to do even as soon as maybe early next year. We'll see how the hiring on that goes. Additional service coverage, so having new routes and having existing routes that are restructured to cover new areas. Results in a 25% increase in the number of jobs that are accessible within a 45-minute ride on transit for the average resident. And also adapting service to travel patterns. So this includes something called our Key Express network, which is a shift in strategy for how we serve the commuter-oriented market. So instead of, it's a network of 8 routes, generally anchored with a large park and ride that has plenty of capacity, where we're committing to having service every 15 minutes or better during the rush hour, as well as having midday service. And the idea is that folks come to us, we'll make it worth your while with the level of service that is certainly still reliable and practical, but less of an approach on having lots and lots of express services that maybe only have a couple of trips on them and serve small park and rides. Really trying to concentrate our resources. Yes. So the question was about how does reverse commute service factor into this Key Express network? And I will say some of that is to be determined. Depends on the routes that, as we're able to ramp up service, it depends on, reverse commute service has almost always been based on what are you already operating, you have to go back and do a second trip on anyway. So it's looking for those opportunities to, fairly inexpensively slip in a trip that may not necessarily carry a lot of customers on it, but we have to bring the bus back to the other end of the line anyway. For example, one of those Key Express network routes is going to be the Route 768, which is up in Brooklyn Park area. That's our main service out of our Noble and Highway 610 park and ride. Target North Campus is just down the street. So we'll be looking at opportunities to blend those together. A little bit of a to be determined. Okay, next slide, please. The other two principles, so implementing our metro network, and that's what's shown on the map here. This is just through 2027, so I don't want to freak anybody out. The blue line extension hasn't gone anywhere. Purple line, F line, H line, are not on here because they're not within our time frame, but we haven't forgotten about them. Also maintaining the reliability of our scheduled service. So really scaling our service as our workforce grows. So as the system grows, or as the organization grows, we're able to grow the system. We want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is sustainable, that we don't have to, once the service is out there, we can keep it out there. We don't have to, we got into trouble with that a couple of years ago, where we had a lot of service that, trips that would have to be suspended the day of, and we don't want to ever get back to that. On the picture in the bottom, that's kind of covered by the, there you go, is the Lake Street corridor in Minneapolis, the red paint for bus-only lanes that have just been installed within the last 6 months or so. Bus-only lanes, and along with transit signal priority, are things that we can do in order to improve travel time and, just as importantly, improve the reliability of the service. Anybody who's been on Lake Street in the last 9 months, the parts that are reopened, that have been redone, it is a completely different world out there compared to how it used to be. So speed and reliability initiatives are certainly another important piece of this. Next slide, please. Okay, switching gears just a little bit, moving away from fixed route service into what's called microtransit. It is a somewhat new type of service for us. I would say, I probably should put the word new in quotes. because it is the type of service, which is essentially a dial-a-ride type demand response, is not new. The application of the technology part of it is what's new. And of course, in this region, the suburban transit providers have been operating some micro transit service for several years now. We have had one pilot in North Minneapolis that we started 2 years ago, and now we're ready to grow on that significantly. Micro transit service is a shared ride on-demand service. Buses operate within a relatively small zone. You request a ride using an app on your phone, or there is a phone number you can call as well. And the average wait time is about 20 minutes. Our first pilot is in North Minneapolis, but now we are shifting our focus into less dense areas that are more difficult to serve with traditional fixed route type of service. So really focusing now on bringing riders even into the fixed route transit network through transit centers and transit way stations. Next slide, please. This is my last one before I'll turn it over to Julie. So the Network Now project outlines 8 new microtransit zones that'll be unveiled within the next 4 years. 2 of those start, hopefully, are on schedule to open late this year and hopefully December. One is out in the East Metro Woodbury Oakdale area, and that is meant to be extension of the G line, not the G line, sorry, the Gold Line. I had the right starting letter. The other is up in Roseville and Shoreview area, and that is going to focus on the Rosedale Transit Center and the A line. And then our goal is to open 2 new projects a year, 2025, 2026, and 2027 at various locations around the region. All of those are shown on the map as just circles because they're more placeholders at this point. We know we want to have them have the service anchored at a transit way station or the significant transit center, but the exact boundaries we'll work with the community on to draw up as we get a little closer. But we know we are constrained by basically how far you can get with, we're prepared to invest 5 buses per zone and an average of 20-minute wait times. So that is what helps constrain the size of those zones. And now I'll turn it over to Julie for the last couple of slides to talk about the engagement process and our next steps.
All right, we're almost done, I promise. If you can advance it. Yeah, so our engagement process is going to be basically collecting feedback and comment from the public. There is an online comment form, and there will be paper versions available. We will accept comments any way they come in. And then we have a series of several meetings scheduled for this fall with a public hearing on October 29th. And we have probably about a dozen other events scheduled. We will also have 2 virtual meetings if you want to jump on those. Those are very popular. Staff will also be doing pop-up events throughout the metro area. We're working with consultants on that. And we'll be on board and at bus stops just talking to folks, getting some of their feedback. And then the usual channels, social media, rider alerts, will be shared across our system. And then we also do direct outreach to our partners that we work with all the time. And if you have any organizations or individuals, let us know, but we probably are already in touch with all of them. Next slide. So the public engagement period will run from September 12th to November 15th. So that is going to be the opportunity to make your comments known. And then over the winter, we will refine the plan based on the feedback and then seek council approval in the spring. And like Cindy mentioned, this will be phased implementation between 2025 and 2027, again, dependent on hiring. And next slide, I think that's it.
We have about 10 minutes for questions. If anyone online has a question, feel free to send it in the chat and I will keep an eye on that and pass it along.
Start over on the far end.
Maybe you could expand more on
Sure. The question is, to what degree is hiring a risk factor in implementing the plan? It's a very significant part of that. We are not only, this represents just on the just bus operators alone. So not talking train operators, not talking support staff, about 400 extra, 400 to 500 extra operators. So this is a very significant lift. And we know that. That was part of the reason that we started doing this planning work, is that we knew we had all these transit ways coming down the line at us that we had to open. And so it's, how do we exactly plan for this? So that is definitely going to be the key factor. We've been blessed with the regional sales tax, that our financial situation is, especially compared to most transit agencies around the country who were getting by on COVID federal money and are losing that we aren't going to have that fiscal cliff. But yes, workforce is going to be the determining factor as to how quickly we can move on these things. Yes. So the question is, what's been the feedback so far on our North Minneapolis micropilot? That project started in the fall of 2022, and it is permanent. So that's been about 2 years. The feedback overall has been fantastic. For those of you who may be a little more in touch with the transit industry, it has been a little controversial because it is a premium service that is not cheap. It's a pretty high subsidy. For micro transit services around the country, it is performing very well. It's about 200, 250 rides a day. Definitely filling a need. In our case, the fare is the same as on the bus side. You can use, if you're a Minneapolis high school student, you have a pass, you can use that. You can use your go-to card. Transfer policies are the same, and so it's been pretty liberal. And so we've had very, very good response rate. We are starting to see some concerns with what we call seat unavailable. If the algorithm is not able to provide a ride within 30 minutes, it will tell you there isn't a seat available. And so really, just the growing pains on that. So the service has been relatively speaking, very productive for microtransit service, about between 4 and 5 rides an hour. That's absolutely nothing, of course, compared to fixed route, which our lowest standards are 10, and we are seeing, that is for suburban small bus routes. Normally, our lowest is about 20s. The D line, for example, is close to 60. So you can see, it's a very, very significant difference. The subsidy is about $15 a passenger, which is more than the fixed route side, but certainly less than the Metro Mobility and Transit Link demand response type services. So it's been both within the transit agency itself and in general, been kind of a controversial. People who have it love it. You don't have to, in the winter, if your sidewalks aren't clear in the bus, it's a curb to curb service. So you don't, a lot of times there's issues with, nobody plows or clears the sidewalk. If you've got, I think about my parents, for example, in the mid 70s, they don't qualify for Metro Mobility service, but come January, standing outside when it's 10 below zero out and the sidewalk hasn't been shoveled is still definitely a challenge. Or if you've got, you're a young family, you've got, a couple, child in a stroller and another one who's just learned to walk, and you're trying to navigate all of that. It definitely has been helpful. The most important or the most significant rides that we're seeing are to the Cub Foods that's on West Broadway. It's the only grocery store in the zone, and also North High School for students who are for choosing to stay late for extracurricular activities or for whatever. Miss the bus in the morning. Minneapolis doesn't provide yellow school bus service within a certain amount anymore either. So, but really, accolades. Everybody wants it. Everybody's, as you can imagine, when am I getting my zone? And that's been one of our challenges. The suburban providers have, when your service area is only 6 by 6, it's a little easier to do that than when your service area is 900 square miles. So we're trying to figure out how to balance that, but going to have to be one zone at a time. In the back. Sure. Yes, so the question is how the demonstration project legislature asked us to do last year to offer free rides on 2 bus routes. Route 32 and Route 62 are the 2 routes that are in the program. How that's been doing and how that really affects our project here. So as expected, it's been doing well. Ridership on both of those routes has increased fairly significantly, between, I'd say, 25 and 40%. That does expire at the end of the year, so we're still figuring out kind of what happens next. Of course, there's been a lot of movement within the industry for do free fares across the system, or within the transit industry in general. So it's kind of tapping into a much bigger issue there. In terms of how it's affected our planning work here, I would say not a lot. Fare policy is not part of what we've been thinking about here. Certainly, it wasn't a surprise in terms of what we're seeing in terms of ridership, although with the fact that it's only those 2 routes, if you transfer, you still have to pay once you transfer. And so it's really not a whole lot of people who are completely not having to pay a fare, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yet we're still seeing the significant increases. So yeah, I'm not involved in that part of it in terms of knowing what happens after December. But it certainly has been an interesting project. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, good job. Sure. So the question was there, one of the statistics that we quoted about this new, this Network Now project is that it increases access to jobs for the average resident by approximately 25%. And that's, a 45-minute ride on transit is what that's looking at. I can take the how we decided 45-minute part first because I'm more confident in that answer. The average resident part is starting to get into statistics, and that is definitely not my area. 45 minutes. So, we've got some data that's, obviously the longer the trip, the less likely somebody is to do that on transit. And 45 minutes really seems to be the point at which you see a significant drop off, and I'm not making that trip. Sometimes you see people use 30 minutes as well, but considering, we went with 45, and that number gets weighted. So, if you have it doesn't treat a trip that is between 1 and 44 minutes exactly the same. It gives more weight to the trips that are shorter, and realizes that the longer the trip, the lower the probability is. It does take that into consideration. But you have to kind of mark it somewhere. And in this, in terms of what it means for the average resident, so that is done at the regional level. It is not, you could certainly get into doing some, representative trip planning. People live in this neighborhood trying to get here, but really the idea is that it's a regional average. So take it with a bit of a grain of salt, I guess, but it certainly is representative of just the amount of increase. And that is mostly achieved through not only some new services, but really improving the frequency on existing services, which cuts down on your transit time, particularly for transferring. That's really where you see a big difference there. Yes. That's a good point. So the question was the statement that our service levels are increasing by 35%, and the question was, what's that compared to as a baseline? And that is compared to what I will say was current, which is actually 2023 data, not pandemic. It is higher than pandemic or pre-pandemic 2019 levels as well. So the question is about on blue line and green line LRT. We've been doing a pilot for the last for the summer so far of using 2-car trains instead of 3-car trains. And my understanding is that that is the plan to continue that. That's especially now that we've been able to improve the frequency from 15 minutes to 12 minutes. That helps a little bit more with balancing loads, particularly on the green line focused at the U of M, which is where we see our heaviest loads. Couple of different reasons for that. First of all, it allows a lot of that's related to more safety and security concerns, but also maintenance related concerns. If you have 2 cars out instead of 3, then that allows the opportunity to be doing preventative maintenance. And we've got some rail cars that are going on 20 years now. But also it is safety and security related in that we've definitely seen the most unwelcome activity, I guess, happening in the middle car, because that's the train that's the car that, you know, depending on which way you're going, you have a conductor or the operator at one end or the other. And yes, they're operating the train. They're not out interacting with the customers, but they're still there. And it is a difference versus that middle car, which never has the operator in it. And that just, especially with the fact that our system, you can't go between train cars unless you're at a station. You have to actually get off and get back on. It's not like the L in Chicago, for example, where you can go between train cars while the train is moving. And so it's really an effort to get rid of that middle car. But we're watching pretty closely because obviously, and then also just to get more eyes and ears. I think part of the safety and security concerns have been people have known to stay away from the middle car unless you're up to no good. And then there's not many folks around either to deter.
So that concludes the virtual portion of our meeting. For those here in person today, obviously the food just got here, so we'll have snacks in the back. If you didn't get a chance to use your drink ticket, feel free to use that now. We have the space for another hour and a half. So stick around and mingle. Upstairs area is really cool. There's lots of seating and couches, so spread out. But yeah, thanks for coming today.